before we start, I just wanted to kind of preface this with like, I've known about you and like your work with Marian Hill for a pretty long time at this point. I was always kind of listening to that kind of minimalist, female vocal centered music, especially in like high school. Got super into it. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of let you know that that was a big kind of inspiration into getting me to be more involved later on especially in college, to start producing more. And eventually, I mean, after I was in the accident, I really wanted to take things more seriously, but I just wanted to, give credit where credit is due, that I really appreciate your style and think it's a really unique, cool space, and definitely shaped a lot of other artists' kind of views and where they want to go with their music. So
Thanks so much. That really means a lot. It's crazy sometimes to realize that Marian Hill started I think in like 6 months it'll be a full decade ago,
yeah,
which just feels crazy. And it means so much every time I hear that someone was listening to our music at a formative time, or it had any role in kind of the course their life took and where their passions took them. I also, when we started Marian Hill, I remember there was lots of talk about like, what's your goal? Like, what do you want to achieve? And like Sam was like, I want to play stadiums or whatever. And I would always say like, I think music is a conversation. Like in general, like all music is in dialogue with the music that came before it. And I just was like, I just want to be part of that conversation. Like that,
absolutely.
that always
You
felt
can
like the
definitely hear
coolest thing
that
in the
in
world to me.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that in like that sound. You definitely have that sound. The duo kind of represents this, juxtaposition of, you have the really refined vocal, very soft and pretty, and then you have your production style, which, not that it's not expected with that vocal, but it is a little bit of a juxtaposition with a little bit more hard hip hop influences, which
Hmm.
creates this. I mean, that was part of the uniqueness of it too, right? I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't just like your typical soft vocal with soft instrumental. It was more along the lines of, Alina Baraz and that
Yeah,
type
yeah.
of, that switch up that we heard in electronic music, where you start to have a little bit more hip hoppy, beat oriented instrumentals. I really like that. I think it's a really unique vibe. I think people try to imitate it, but not everyone gets it right. Um, and yeah, it's cool to see people who are really able to nail the head on the more simplified, subtle beat making styles. I think that's something that's kind of, you know, part of your style, even in your solo stuff, is being able to really nail those simple things and get them right. It's pretty impressive too.
Thank you. I mean, I owe so much of that to the happy accident of making Whiskey the first Marion Hill song. I was trying to make all kinds of different things at the time. I always also mentioned the like kismet that happened, which was that Reason, which I've been using since Reason 3.5 in like 2006 or seven or something. They had for many years been just like MIDI, like you would run Reason through Rewire in Pro Tools if
Yeah,
you wanted to record audio. But my senior year of college, they added audio in Reason, and Reason had been kind of like I was doing more, I guess at the time, serious composition stuff in college, where I was like notating things and writing songs that way. And in the background, when I like had a free minute, I'd like play around with making beats in Reason. But my senior year, they added audio, and I was like, well, damn, let me see if I can like try making some pop music with my friends and see what that sounds like. And I tried a bunch of different things. And one of them was Whiskey. I was Sam and I grew up together in the Philly suburbs, and I was home for I think spring break. It's either that or fall break. I'm pretty sure it was spring break. Um, and I was just like playing her some of the beats I wrote on, and she started singing the Whiskey melody over the whiskey, the beat, which at the time I was like, this is a hip hop beat. This wouldn't really be something I'd play Sam.
Yeah.
Um, but there was something so cool about her like very intricate, very sultry vocal existing on top of this, as you said, kind of like more like hard hitting, a little bit electronic beat. And at the time, we were like, "What's going on? This is really interesting." And
Yeah.
we emailed it out to a bunch of. I targeted a bunch of specific Hype Machine blogs. Um,
Back in the Hype
emailed them
Machine
all,
days.
and yeah, man,
Yeah.
the Hype Machine days. But yeah, for those unfamiliar, I'll do a quick thing on it. But the Hype Machine was this aggregator website that would have a chart on the front page, and the chart was based on how many blogs posted it. I think there was also some weighting in the blogs based on their
Yeah.
readership, and then there was also like people like me would be on Hype Machine every day, pretty much seeing what new music is happening, and you could heart your favorites, and that would also affect the rankings. And I mean, I wish someone should put together the cumulative list at some point, but the amount of artists that broke through Hype Machine that are still around in some form today is pretty incredible. I mean,
Absolutely. I
Billie
think I
Eilish was
remember
on there.
seeing
We were on there. Like, yeah, Arcade Fire, billions of others. Like, truly
absolutely.
crazy.
I remember seeing, I think a little bit later after Hype Machine, maybe Hype Machine was still pretty involved, but a little bit later when This Song Is Sick started to kind of get its rise. And I think This Song Is Sick was actually featured on some Hype Machine things in its early days too,
Definitely,
but
they
for
they were
sure.
within the Hype Machine
They were within like
ecosystem.
that ecosystem, yeah, for sure. I think Nick out of Colorado was running the website at that
Hmm.
point. But I remember finding like Down and a couple other of your songs through there just because I wasn't at that point I wasn't super well versed in the electronic scene, and a lot of the
Hmm.
artists that were being exposed through Hype Machine, these online blogs, were lesser known artists. You know, they were small artists, and
Hmm.
it was really giving them a platform to blow up.
Hmm.
And yeah, it is cool to see a lot of those artists. I mean, even someone like Skrillex has a lot
Yeah.
of kudos to give some of these online aggregators for a lot of the success that they reached,
Hmm.
for sure.
It was a crazy time. I'm very grateful to it because I really think it allowed interesting music to rise to the top. Um, and you really had like the whole music industry infrastructure was looking at those charts to find new acts for a few years.
Definitely.
Um, but yeah, we were talking about the Marian Hill sound, and I think yeah, it really was. Whiskey happened. People liked whiskey, and then that was kind of where our sound was born from. And one of the things about whiskey was that Sam's vocal was super unadorned, and part of that is because I didn't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is just that I come from a background of singing, and I knew Sam's voice really well, and I've always been resistant to like, and I'd heard stories from Sam about she'd been doing at the time like more traditional pop songwriting sessions, and she would leave the session with a demo where she could barely recognize her voice because it had
Yeah.
been like tuned and compressed and just like
The
shoved
over
into a box.
processing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, I, especially these days, would never be one to say like processing is bad because, like, obviously there are several incredible artists that like sound awesome raw, but also can do incredible things with processing their voice and use it artfully and create a really unique character. But I think, especially in those early days, for someone like Sam, she had such a fascinating and unique vocal character. But when you overprocessed her, she would just become like she would sound exactly like all of the other
Yeah.
like female pop singers recording demos. So it was. We have a famous. She always tells me like that before we put whiskey out. I wanted to. She wanted to tune it. She was like, "Do you think we could just like get someone to tune the vocal?" And I was like, "I don't like. Why would you? It sounds great."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It doesn't need it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and so much of what we would build into with the Marion Hill vibe was like finding those little blue notes and having fun with skimming the top of a note in the right bluesy context and things like that. But yeah, I held out and I didn't tune it, and she was like, "Fine, you can put it out." But then, yeah, going forward, the like two halves of the formula became like really letting her voice shine and be its unique self and not doing too much to it. And that meant both in the processing, but also in the production. I think kind of I learned this from listening to podcasts with or interviews with 40, who's Drake's producer and one of my
Yeah.
idols. And he talks a
Carving
lot
out the
about
part of the instrumental.
exactly.
Yeah.
And some of it's carving out, but I've also like, especially doing early in Marian Hill stuff, like so much of mixing is the choices you make. Like like I think
Absolutely.
it's easy to think about and common to think about mixing as like, all right, we make the thing and then we carve out space for all the stuff. And that's a way to do it, but often like it's gonna there's gonna be even more space if you just like structure the arrangement such that
Hmm.
there isn't really anything noisy going on where the vocals happening. And I can't
Definitely.
always do that. And some
Yeah,
songs
it can
don't
be
do that.
hard.
But
Yeah.
it's hard. Sometimes you got to make it work, and it's really cool anyway. But especially with those early Marian Hill records, I think a lot of it was like the stuff in her vocal register was shorter and quicker, and the
Hmm.
sustained stuff was more under her.
Hmm.
Um, and especially in those first years when I didn't know that much about mixing, that was a lot of what I was relying on to make things sound good. Is it was that, and it was just like it was picking the right sounds. Like so much of my early production was just like whiskey got the response it got, and people wanted more, and it was like, okay, we've got to like figure out this formula and make more music. And I always say that like that year after whiskey, I had like the most dramatic kind of increase in my production skills, because it was just like, okay, I guess this could be the thing I do now, and I need to get a lot better at it. And it was a really exciting time.
Yeah, I think having that mentality that you don't want to add too much processing or you don't want to add too many plugins to a vocal, it really opens up really a more unique sound to come apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're using the same plugins, I mean, let's say you're using Echo Mode, for
Mm-hmm.
example, famous
I love
plugin, a lot
Echo
of people
Bud.
use it. Really fun, right? Especially if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing sound design, can be really fun. But the reality is if you have, you know, sample one and sample two, and you throw them both through the same patch of echo mode with all the same settings, right? At the end of the day, they're going to be sounding more similar after that effect processing than
Definitely.
before because it's going to
Yep.
shape the sound in a similar way. And I think the trap that a lot of artists go into is they hear, whether it's on YouTube or somewhere else, someone proclaiming this like, oh, well, this is how you need to do it if
Mm-hmm.
you want the vocal to sound good. Use these
Mm-hmm.
presets with these plugins, this arrangement, this way. Forget about looking at the actual sound as a unique piece. Just follow this formula and you're going to end up with the perfect sound. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when you choose not to do that, and when you chose not to do that for Marian Hill and with your own ventures, it really opens up the world of more unique sounds and more authentic sounds because you retain the original feeling of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me of I think I'm gonna quote Sondheim here, which is not a usual reference on a producer podcast, but I fucking love Sondheim, and he has a quote where he says that basically it's in the context of like there are so many people like making art, making music, like how does one differentiate oneself? And he set it up as these kind of, obviously there's often something in between, but he sets it up as two poles. He's like, you can either be the best at the stuff that everybody's doing, or you can be doing something that no one else is doing.
Yeah.
And to me, the doing something no one else was doing was always like way more exciting and inspiring. And I know friends who are incredible producers and can do whatever sound you need at the best. And that's another way to do it, and it's a great art. But for me, I've always more enjoyed like how do I stand out? How do I do something strange? It's part of why, along with them adding, as we said, audio, and now in like 4 or 5 years ago they added VSTs, and But part of why I'm still in Reason too is just that I it's exciting to use Ableton, and every now and then I'm tempted by it, and I there's lots of tricks that I hear producers I know doing in
Yeah.
Ableton that I think would be cool to try, but it's another part of me that's just like, I don't know, it's not broken Reason. I have a different, I mix and master in Reason, and it just sounds a little warmer to my ear, and
Yeah.
I like that.
I think that there's definitely, I don't know if it's some voodoo magic, and I talk to, a lot of other producers about this kind of thing, but you have the FL Studio guys, and
Mm-hmm.
when they make a beat and they put the drums in, I don't know what it is, but I can
Mm-hmm.
do the same arrangement with drums, and for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, it doesn't sound as punchy as when they put
Yep.
it through the stock master that FL
Mm-hmm.
has. And I think ignoring all the like voodoo that goes on with that, there is definitely different styles of workflow that are standard to different DAWs. Maybe if you're in Reason, you're going to work differently than if you're in Ableton. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
use Ableton myself, and part of the reason why I was gravitated towards it in the first place was because of the loop-based performative aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
which lends itself to really be a great tool to use if you're doing things live and if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing improv style things. But if you're doing more of a meticulous production, especially in the beginning, it wasn't really as designed for that. Now they've improved, and I think a lot of the DAWs have kind of, they've come towards a lot of, similarities of sorts in the way that they do things because they see, well, Ableton's doing this right. Maybe we should do some of that too, or Reason's doing this right. Maybe we should incorporate
Mm-hmm.
that, or Pro Tools, etc. But I think that it's each artist should embrace their workflow, and if, like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, it's so interesting the differences between them and their like little algorithms. I know I was just thinking a producer friend of mine, Low File, swears by um, I think I forget it's like one of the Waves tape things
Mm,
that he has like found a setting on that he's like done head to head a ton with FL, and he's like, I think this is how you approximate
yeah,
the FL like master bus.
that's
But
funny.
it's like you said, it's an in-depth thing, and I mean I feel the same about my Reason master bus. I just love it. I was when we were mixing down with Tony Maserati, who our label was paying for, and who became a great friend because we got to mix two albums basically just like together. But Down was one of the longest mixes because the drum track in that song was so shaped by the Reason master compressor, which is a like emulation of an SSL. But when Tony tried an SSL emulation in his Pro Tools session, it
Didn't
wasn't
sound right.
right.
Yeah,
We tried so many different things, and I was just like, man, like if you know Down, like the drums coming in and sounding the way they do is like half of the
I mean that's the
what
song.
makes the
Yeah,
song exactly.
yeah,
So we were going back so many different ways, and what we ended up doing is I just literally bounced the drums like kick, snare, hat through that master compressor,
mm,
and then Tony mixed it in. But we needed that sound, and I couldn't find a replacement for it, and it's a really fascinating thing that happens. I guess probably used to happen with hardware, and now happens like deep within this software, and who knows what bit of code is exactly making that sound the way we need it to.
very
But
true.
it is.
I think it's interesting to see there was a kind of a unanimous acceptance of, because of the hardware that was involved, bouncing things as a whole and really putting them to tape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And making permanent decisions in the sound, right? It sounds good, it sounds right. That's it. We have it. We
Mm-hmm.
have it. Now, because you can always go back into the project and change little settings and always make little tweaks, I think people are starting to have to make adjustments in being able to hear something, make the adjustment, and then end up with something that you're proud of how it sounds,
Hmm.
because you don't have that. You're not forced by the media to kind of put you in a, you know, I don't know, not to say that you're forced in there, but you're more free to do things, and because you're more free to make mistakes too, and to
Yeah.
overcomplicate things and overanalyze things. But I find working with other people can sometimes fix that, because let's say you're in Reason, I'm in Ableton. Well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to bounce it to you, right? I'm
Hmm.
not going to try to do some project conversion, whatever. It's way easier just to bounce it, and then that the person's getting what you want them to get. It's easier to work on something that how it's going to sound on their system. So
Hmm.
it's definitely interesting to see that progress over time.
It's also one of the I was just thinking about when you were talking about all the how it used to be so fixed and now it can be kind of anything. It can be a little paralyzing, I think, when you really think about like I often think about like the history of music and like for so long there were these specific limited tools and like you had instruments and microphones and voices and people did lots of interesting things to make those sound different, but that was the deal. And then, really, in the last probably 20 years, it has become you can make any sound you can dream. Like, truly, any ensemble you want to put together, any type of sound you want to imagine, like, the only limiting factor is like your understanding of the technology. But, like, it's all there and it can be kind of overwhelming when you're like, well, what am I going to make when I can pull on every sound ever imagined? Um, and I know lots of producers, you can get kind of lost in that sauce when you have so many options, so many plugins to try, so many
Absolutely.
ways you can tweak an arrangement. I've always been really fortunate to just, I love finishing things. And I feel like I have a good sense of just like I think the feeling of bouncing out something and knowing it's the final one is like one of my favorite feelings in the world that I like chase and crave.
I need some of that. I need some of that in my
Yeah.
life.
I really love it. I always have, but I think it also helps. I think, like you were saying, with when working with others, like it can be so much of the benefit for me of having such a long working relationship with Sam and Marian Hill, and more recently having the working relationship with Rio Cragen. Like you don't have to decide all on your own. And once there are two people being like, "Is this good enough?" When you're both like, "Yeah," you're like, "Okay, we're done." And if anyone is like, I don't know, then there's something specific to ask them about and figure out. But like when you have just like a second person, it can be much easier to make those decisions.
For sure. Looking at those two relationships between Sam and Rio, there's definitely a lot of similarities in your sound and what you bring to the table. How do you, when you look at kind of the differences and similarities between how your sound has started at the very beginning and how it is now, you know, what do you, what do you attest some of that change to? And do you, do you see it as a cohesive style, or do you see it as an ever changing kind of identity?
What a good question. Um, I'd say it's probably somewhere in between those two things that you just suggested. I think it reminds me of so very early on with Marian Hill, like within the first few months of making stuff, we got a little stuck, and everything we were making was sounding the same. Um, and I realized we had a moment at some point where we'd been thinking so much about we have to use this sound, we have to use this sound, like it's got to sound like this. And there was a moment where we were just like, okay, well, I think at a certain point, if we both really like something, it's going to sound like us.
For sure.
um, and I think just like learning to trust that more and more, like, I think I do have a sound. I think it's wide ranging, but I think um, Rio will tell you that the drums are always going to be loud. especially the snare. It's going to
Love
sit
it.
right on top. Really important to me. One of the number one things I'll do if I'm going in to mix something else is just like make sure the drums are forward enough. Um, and aside from that, I mean, I think it's really, I think so much of what makes good music in the modern day is a unique voice and like a literal voice. I
Yeah.
think I'm really self conscious about my own singing voice, but like Sam and Rio both have very unique, very specific, and very just like voices that you are want to hear what they're saying. And so much of the production worlds that I've built around both of them are in response to that. Sam's voice is like incredibly light and feathery, so you want to give her lots of space, and you also want to like enjoy the contrast between that floating voice and like a big boom kick. Um, and Rio has such crazy versatility, um, and can like rap or sing beautifully or be somewhere in between, which is where he ends up most of the time. And does really well because his voice can just cut through anything with just like really cool and bigger textures that I maybe wouldn't put with Sam. Um, but I approach it both the same way. I'm like, what is this song? How is the vocal functioning, and then how do I best like serve that and deliver the ideas of the song and the vocal performance.
Yeah, I think they both definitely have very recognizable and textural sounding vocals uh, that make you want to emphasize those sounds and highlight them with the instruments that you're pairing with them. And I think you do a really excellent job with both those things. I know recently one of the tracks you did with Rio, Heaven, I think it was called. I really like that track. I just there's I like all of Rio's music. Like you said, his voice is just so versatile. But there are some tracks, just like um, with every vocalist, that just hit different, I guess. So
Yeah, he's got such an edge to his voice, and Heaven was a really, I think one of the bigger differences between me and Sam and me and Rio's working relationship is Rio and I love making music together, but like the vast majority of our music we made apart. He's a very resourceful singer and producer in his own right, and in a lot of times he'll be most comfortable writing when he's just like at his computer locked
yeah,
in on his own. Um, and I also love working on just like diving in on a song and working on it on my own too. So much of our process has been more of that separate back and forth, but we've still like Heaven came from a really cool place of conversation in that project where we had finished Diary of a Loner and we are just talking about the type of stuff we wanted to make. And I think it was literally a conversation of like he was like, I want to make some more like alt rock shit, some more like Phoebe Bridgers stuff, and I love Smoke Signals a lot, and the new Taylor Swift, the like piano Bryce Dessner Taylor Swift album had just came
yeah,
out, and I was like, what if I let me make some shit for Rio that's like delicate and like kind of in that world. And that was Heaven. He wrote to it like pretty soon after I sent it, and we were going back and forth on it, and it was really really cool. I think we were both really happy about it, and it was fun to work on it as kind of an experiment where it. I think for both of us, we were like we've been making a lot of stuff with like choruses and big drums and things like that, and like how do we subvert that in this song? Like how do we just make something really cool that doesn't feel like something we've made before?
definitely. How did you guys meet?
So the first the first meeting we had that we minted what we made a while back was through one of my close friends, Noli, who now makes music under the name Noli. But when I met him, he was doing a lot of just like photo and video stuff for artists on the road. I was doing some sessions with Pell in LA in like 2015, 2016, and Nolan was staying in his house, and we were just hang out. We struck up a really good bond, and like sometime after that, I forget when it was, maybe 2018. Nolan had just done a shoot with Rio and was like, I think you guys would like really hit it off. And so he just like connected us on email. I sent him a beat. He sent me the idea right back. But the funny thing is, then nothing else happened. I know now that Rio was like in the midst of kind of the Flume tour stuff and
Yeah.
just like really on the road, going living day to day, like not up on everything in the same way he is now. But it's crazy. It was really, I think, a few years went by, and then like in 2019, at one point, he like I think he just like commented on a Marian Hill Instagram post, and I DM'd him and was like, "Yo, it's like been a minute. Can I send you some beats?" And he was like, "Definitely." And I sent him a pack of I think like 5 or 10 ideas, and he wrote to two of them, and one of them was "No Place I'd Rather Be," which is one of my favorite things we've ever made together, and had been a beat that I had just been waiting for someone to do something with for the Clear Eyes project. I'd been playing it for people for a few years at that point, and nobody really knew what to do with it. And he just like it's an irregular phrase length. It's got like a um, three three bar or 6 bar, depending on how you look at it, loop of the bass note, where you'd expect it to be four. And Rio, most people got confused by that, and Rio just wrote this incredible like 4 bar normal melody that works over it, but then the bass is like in a different place each time the melody comes back around because of the unevenness in their lengths. And anyway, I was just so fucking excited when he wrote to that one. And not only that, then like the next day he called me. It was just like, "Yo, I like really love what we made. Are you going to be out in LA anytime soon? I want to work with you on the album." And kind of from there, we started working a lot more. I was out in LA 2 different times that year, and we worked for like several days both times, and did the video for No Place I'd Rather Be in the Desert right before the pandemic with Nolan, who introduced us. And then the pandemic hit, and he moved out of LA, and we reconnected about a year into that, and started making a lot more stuff again, finishing the things we'd started. And at a certain point, he was showing me all the options for Diary of a Loner, which wasn't called that at the time, and it just started making sense for us to work together on that. And it's just been building and building from there. It's really special when you can build up a musical vocabulary with someone, and I feel like we've got a really nice Venn diagram of our taste figured out
Definitely.
at this point that makes it really fun and fluid to work.
Definitely. I think another thing that obviously happened afterwards that is very similar between you two is your take on the industry and kind of your passion for curation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, obviously now you're very involved with loners, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like your and Rio's creation of sorts that you've shaped and given a platform to all sorts of different artists, all sorts of different styles. Um, so, what was really your motivation personally to be involved with a DAO that you know started from really a crowd fund
Mm-hmm.
and has evolved into not just a platform for artists, but a community for curators and a community for people who are just passionate about the artists that are involved there, and honestly, just both of you.
Thanks, man. I mean, I think we're both just like so thrilled with where Loners is at right now. It's definitely in a bigger and better place than we originally imagined it. When we were having early conversations about it, I think it's kind of two different trains of conversation kind of merged. One of them was um, both of us, the more we built up our creative chemistry and just like loved making stuff together, we were like, man, we could have an imprint someday. We could have like a publishing JV. Like we could produce other people's records. Like lots of things. Like because between the two of us, we can tackle almost any genre. We can handle all sorts of stuff. But then Rio, as we both were learning more about Web3, he was really getting more and more invested in like, well, I want to build something here, but like, what should we build? And one of the biggest things that I think unlocked a lot of what we wanted to do with Loners is we were seeing a lot of big projects that were about elevating the artist, the main artist doing the project. And I think that's really cool and great. But I think Rio had the really important thought at that point where he was like, yeah, but like, I think the like better proposition and the more exciting proposition and the proposition with more of a chance to scale is the one where we lift a lot of people up with us. And once he had that unlock, it became like, all right, how exactly do we do that in a way that feels manageable? Um, and then that's, we had the idea for the Loners Freshman. We had like soon after the crowd fund, which we outlined that plan, we had like over 100 applications that Rio and I were combing through, really exciting artists. And I'm so passionate about the model of elevating artists like that, helping them make their best music as the Loners team, and then like launching them out into the world. It, I think, is just a really cool way of working that takes a lot of the pressure and burden off of the artist because they're not like locked into a deal with expectations where it's all on them. And I think, I mean, Rio then had the idea to start the curation cycle that we started like 3 or 4 months ago. And that has been so fun and exciting too. I think, we talked earlier about Hype Machine, and I am just such an advocate of human curation and finding places and opportunities in music, and especially as we build a new system here in Web3 for having more human creation of songs that people are really connecting to that don't need to have some type of viral thing happen to them on one of our main social media platforms for people to connect with it and have a moment with it.
One of the problems that I see in Web3, at least currently, especially in the music area, is there's a little bit of a disconnect between basically the viability of someone to be successful in Web3 and to maybe sell out on sound or have a community of curators on sound, and for that to be translated into the person being able to do live shows or the person being able to tour. And obviously musicians, at least currently, they still need that as part of, especially if they're just starting out, they need that as part of their discoverability for the average person. Do you think that there's a road in the future for there to be a true artist that has zero connections outside of the Web3 world to be really brought up, propped up, and exposed via the Web3 world, via either curation or collecting on various markets? What do you see as the path there?
So I want to believe that's possible. I do think it's most likely that there will be a little bit of everything. Um, and it feels like it might be a rarer occurrence for someone to be exclusively Web3 and have a breakthrough like that. But my hope is that the idea of music NFTs becomes more and more normalized and comfortable for people to understand, and just like another way to connect with a favorite artist in the way that, like, I don't know, some people maybe don't follow their favorite artists on TikTok. Maybe they just follow their friends there and they listen to their favorite artists on Spotify. And other people might have a different approach, and some people might only be in Spinamp, and some people, I think what I would hope is that there's like a song or a moment or many for many different artists. Maybe it's a cascade instead of just one. But as a certain point where we're people start to be, as a society, like, oh, this is cool. This is another interesting thing, and it's not a big confusing thing that we need to like worry about in terms of, and by that I mean like the Web3 side, the NFT side. I
Yeah,
think with every month that passes, we see so many things change in the space, and we see so many um, things get fixed and improved, and new things getting tried out. And I think that's part of what's so exciting and fun about being in it right now, is that everything can feel new and like it's for the first time. Um, and I think inevitably one or more of those experiments will cross over and start really getting people excited.
definitely. With the shortcomings that you acknowledged in the Web3 world, do you see loaners as eventually becoming not simply a Web3 based platform?
Um, we are considering a lot of exciting options, but I think that
Too soon,
at this
alpha.
juncture, yes, it's at this juncture, and nothing official is planned, and I think we're really focused on what's right in front of us
Definitely.
in Web3.
There's definitely still, like you said, it's definitely very new still. And I mean, obviously, you don't want to spoil anything if there is anything planned or if there isn't. But it's also, it's hard to plan when it really is so month to month,
Hmm.
project to project kind of system currently. And when there is such a strong community right now that, I mean, the loaners community is great. I mean, you have every drop has sold out almost immediately. You have, new people getting involved. I see new people popping in the TG chat almost daily.
Hmm.
And, it's really cool to see. You have artists collecting from other artists. You have people who never even collected an NFT before getting involved. And so it's cool to see, that the leadership has really brought all those different people together and created avenues for everyone to kind of have a voice in the community and to be able to, whether it's just talk with some of the artists that they like or that they're listening to, or, for me, I've discovered new artists. And so that it's really nice to have that option on the table.
Yeah, I think it's really important to us to have it feel always like it's an artist-led um, community, like full of artists and full of hopefully undeniable music.
Definitely. Do you think that more main labels are going to adopt Web3? You've already started to see it with, people like Diplo and, you know, Snoop Dogg, encouraging and embracing music NFTs and other Web3 kind of platforms. Do you think it's going to become more standard as the average person develops, a Robinhood crypto wallet, and it just becomes more normalized? Or do you think that it's going to be kind of only in specific areas and maybe genres that are maybe more tech oriented, such as the electronic scene?
To be honest, I'm really not sure. I think um, I feel very comfortable in my intuitions and feelings about music. And when it comes to the bigger picture, kind of like Web3 market questions, I have my hopes and my dreams for it, but a lot of the time I rely on people like Rio and Cooper and other friends like David Greenstein, other friends I consult with who are more just comfortable predicting and observing the dynamics of the marketplace and technology. I do think, though, as a maybe as like a final thought on it all, I think the biggest thing that I do feel sure about in the grand scheme is that I've had a 10-year music career so far. When my career started, Spotify wasn't a thing. It was all the iTunes store. I then saw Spotify become a huge thing. I then and I saw Spotify playlists dictate what was popular. I then saw TikTok become a huge thing. And that dictates what is popular. Spotify's now following that. Through all that time, the label has gotten like vastly less powerful, even though they still have their power and their money. They are following the trends way more than they're making them. Um, all of which is to say, that's 10 years and like three sea changes. I am so convinced that whatever the state of the music industry is in 5 years, it will not be what it is today. And there will be some pretty significant differences. And I think that all this innovations and things happening in Web3 probably have the best chance right now of being involved in what that next paradigm is.
Absolutely. I actually, when I was in college, I did my senior thesis. I studied economics in college. I did my senior thesis on the, trends of the music industry and how different technology has changed the industry. One thing that I, took away from that, not just from an economic standpoint, but personal standpoint, is that it was just nice to see that the independent share of the industry has grown over time,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's more avenues with these new technologies for independent artists, young artists, people who don't have either the social connections to the right people or the financial connections to the right companies, for them to still have an avenue to succeed. And I think that's really good. Whether it's someone like you having blogs write about Marian Hill and have that be helpful to succeed, or an artist that blows up on TikTok, I think both are really good things, and they help small artists and encourage the industry to be, I don't know, it seems like it's more authentic to the
Mm-hmm.
people and the musicians, as opposed to just serving, the master label and what they want.
Yeah,
So definitely.
absolutely.
As a last question, I would
Mm-hmm.
ask, do you have any plans personally for Clear Eyes? Anything that you can disclose about like projects that you have in the works, or just in general, what do you see as the future in your musical career?
I am in the process. I got a call later today to check back in. I just returned from Loner's IRL last night, so I am gonna take a chill day and then start getting things moving again. But I don't want to, I don't want to let up on Clear Eyes releases for more than a month or two for a while. I've got a really exciting 2 pack of singles with this rapper Pell that I'm really excited about. That'll be happening most immediately on the Web 2 side, and then I'm working on the next bigger Clear Eyes project that'll come after that. Getting collaborations in order, finishing demos, and turning them into full songs. That's kind of my next project for the next month or so. And then starting probably next week if I can get it together. I have to do our part 6 of my dialogue series with Bloody White, and I'm excited to dive back into that world. It's been a really fun production experience for me, and that'll be on Sound probably next Wednesday again if I can get my shit together.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that combined with some really exciting Loners releases coming up. Yeah, if you're in my collector chat or follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you'll be kept up to date with a lot of exciting music and collaborators in the coming year for sure.
Definitely. I've really enjoyed watching, just as a side note, the back and forth between you and Bloody for the releases. It's been really cool to see tracks like that. The online world has really enabled that to happen, and it's really cool to just listen to how things change
Yeah,
via the
it's
different
been
tracks. It's really cool.
such a fun experiment to um, really, just for me at least, strip out so many of the other factors of making something and just be like, all right, it's like a response to this last track, and we're in a musical dialogue together. And it's gonna be so cool, I think, to listen to in order. We've been talking about ways to put it out on Spotify and other places, and I kind of want to just sneak it in somewhere and do like a song a day for like 6 days,
Well, I like that. Yeah.
just to kind of shake things up. And probably nothing will happen, but maybe somebody at Spotify will be like, "What the fuck is this? A song a day?" So we'll see. I think it could be cool.
Editorial. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been a really nice conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming
Always
on.
love taking the time to talk about the process of making music and production, and it's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for anyone who's listening or watching, just be sure to give Jeremy a follow on all the socials, and it encourages him to keep making music, and you can stay update on all the exciting actions and Loners and Clear Eyes and Marian Hill, and who knows what's going to come next. So it's an exciting experience, an exciting journey to be a part of, and it was really nice talking to you. Thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
it was great talking to you, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah. And just, in the future, feel free to, reach out if you ever want to come on again. And if, there's anyone who could be interested in having this kind of long form conversation, I'm happy to sit down with anyone. And yeah, I really do appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. It's rare you get to have this long conversation about the nuance, the details of stuff, and I'm always a fan of it.